movies we like, part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
I'm Pete Wright.
On today's episode, we have invited writer-director Mandy Fabian to talk about Lawrence Kasdan's The Big Chill, a movie she likes.
Loves.
Mandy, welcome to the show.
Oh, sorry, hi. I just jumped in there. Loves. I'm obsessed with. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Mandy, it's about time.
I know.
We are thrilled to have you here to talk about you, your career, your film that you have playing, and, of course, this film you love.
I do, yeah. I know. And there's nothing that I like to talk about more. So, great.
Oh, perfect.
And yourself and The Big Chill.
We've scheduled the next 5 hours, so hopefully we'll be able to squeeze it all in.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up, guys. Buckle up. This is going to be great. I took notes.
Yeah, right. Well, before we jump into The Big Chill, because we certainly are going to talk about that, let's talk a little bit about you and your career and your story. And we should preface this by saying, on our network, there's a show called The Curiosity Codex hosted by Kyle Olson, and he's had you on for a whole series of episodes talking about your career and your journey through the industry and your process of making your first film, Jess Plus None, and kind of like that whole journey. So we'll certainly put a link to that in the show notes. But we're covering some of the same stuff, but I mean, just getting a sense of who you are and kind of how you decided, this is the industry I want to be working in. What was your journey like?
I think I was like a lot of those people that really couldn't do anything else. I mean, I've always been just a clown, ever since I was a kid. Like, my mom was very funny. My grandmother was very funny. Oh my God, I just called myself funny. That's like the first rule of comedy. That's you should never say, I'm hilarious.
Yeah. But, deprecating always includes a self.
Yeah, exactly. But I just was always, I was always trying to make people laugh and get on stage. So I started off actually as an actor who did a bunch of character work. And I did sketch comedy, in college and improv, and then in New York City. And then I guess I decided that I found that I was liking doing the sketches and characters that I created, maybe even more than doing Chekhov's Three Sisters. That was not for me. Or anything written by the masters. I was like, tone, I didn't go with like classical, really well-written theater. I was like, fellas, I got this. And I started writing my own stuff for theater, actually. And then that moved into doing silly, like writing music. And I did these silly, YouTube videos. And then I shot the music videos. And that's actually what got me started in directing, is I was singing and recording music and then shooting my own music videos and then editing them. And
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the first time I found myself on a film set was like this crazy, oh, wow, I've been preparing for this exact job and I didn't even know it. Yeah. Although I was also a film major in college. So I don't know what I was thinking. I went to a college reunion. I was like, guys, guess what? I'm a director now. And they were like, yeah, you were.
That's why we
already.
Yeah.
You actually majored in film. So I'm not sure why this is a surprise to you, but I kind of,
they say a lot of people who go to film school, when you get out, the first job that you're actually ready for is being a PA. So I suppose the fact that some of them actually did make it to director is a nice surprise.
Well, when I say I was a clown, I'm not kidding. Like, I was in improv and sketch, and I only became a film major because I was like, listen, I got this acting thing down. There's nothing you could teach me. So I'm going to learn about all the people on the other side of the camera and learn what they do. But it's only so I could be a better actor. Truly, I was so cocky and ridiculous that's why I became a film major. But then later I was like, I really like this filmmaking stuff.
Yeah.
So nuts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So proud. So proud of that path.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a train wreck, but it's very wiggly, but it has been a lot of fun.
Well,
good,
I don't know. I don't know if it's post-worthy. I know it's post-worthy. I don't know if it's someplace public, but some of your music videos, particularly there was the celebration of Pride.
I love the gays.
I love the gays is one of the funniest things that I've ever had the pleasure of watching, and I share it with everybody. Gay, straight, they all get subjected to. I love the gays. Maybe it's a classic of the oeuvre.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I wrote it when they were debating on whether or not gay marriage should be legal in the state of California.
Yeah,
there was a proposition, and I wrote this song, and in the song I say, I hope my children grow up to be good and gay. And guess what? My oldest daughter's a lesbian.
Oh,
So
you won parenting.
I won. Like,
But
all
I
you have to
think
do
this
is
is
write
the-
a song about it and it comes true, guys.
This is the thing about the West Coast, though. I mean, what they say is true. Like, you failed as a parent if at least one of your children doesn't grow up gay in
Yeah.
California, Washington, Oregon. Like, you just have to have that.
Yes. Or at least bi.
Bare minimum.
Oh my God, yeah. We're the only state, or I guess area of the country where we're like, yeah, but honey, why don't you try girls? I mean, like, look how pretty Susie looks. Don't you want to carry some of her books? I mean, it's true.
It's so
I
true.
know.
So true. It's never been so clear.
Oh, I'm so glad that you like I Love the Gays. That's a
Oh,
good
it's,
one. Yeah.
it's hysterical. It's great.
Yeah. And if
It's
you're
great.
having a bad day, like I Love the Gays is a love letter to gay people, but I Hate Everyone is a love
Mhm.
letter to anyone who's having a really bad day. That's another song I really liked.
But see,
I hate it.
this is the thing that I love about those songs because they feel so much like I'm listening to the podcast Lonely Island and the Lonely Island podcast right now that they're doing with Seth Meyers,
Yeah.
which is a review of all of their stuff, and some of their classic music videos feel very much like you were kind of ahead of those guys on SNL, like a Good Day and Throw It on the Ground. Like some of those things kind of have that flavor of just great songs that are total earworms and are statement comedy, and it's just perfect.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks. Yeah, I kind of was like, as we've stated, I tend to bounce from things to things, but
Yeah.
I kind of was doing YouTube before
Yeah.
YouTube was the
Yeah,
thing,
right, right.
and I had it was.
It was like, what was that one where it was like you'd make those little videos, but they're all like 5 seconds long? What was that app that had
Was
a
that
free?
Snapchat? No, I
It
don't
wasn't
remember.
Snapchat. It was like you would make these super short videos. That
Vine?
was like their whole thing. Vine.
Oh, Vine. I bet
It's
that's
like,
yeah.
Yeah, it was bought by Twitter and summarily
Killed.
destroyed.
Murdered.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
But there were like some serious like Vine stars, and that was their whole
Mhm.
shtick. Was like, I'm going to just
6
be
seconds.
expert at making these little 6-second videos. That's how
That's
with
also-
that music group, or the duo, us the duo.
Us the duo.
Oh, yeah,
they were
that's
found making
right.
cute little ditties on that. Yeah.
yeah. I remember when Vine came up. I think I was already like, ugh, like that's part of my career strategy
already
is when
past
everyone's
that.
zigging, I'm going to zag.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
that could make me famous. I'm going to go over here.
Well, so you go from like making these sorts of projects, but I mean, obviously, you don't just sit down in LA and just go, okay, well, I'm a director now. I'm going to jump in and start making movies. I mean, there was still a process. Like once you finished college and you kind of went through a process, a number of different things, trying to figure out what is the next step and where am I going to go? So what were those next steps on your path to figuring it all out?
Well, what I love about it, there was a little bit of luck, and then also just I love doing this stuff so much. Like I never resented it or got bored with it, and I loved dragging people into doing the music videos. So I was just frothing with joy about all of this, right? And then I wrote this short film script because I had an idea that I just thought was really funny. And clearly I laugh at my own jokes. And I have a friend who was a producer and she wanted to produce it, but she said, I'll only produce it if you direct it. And I was like, huh. I was 7 months pregnant with my first daughter, or with my second daughter. I think it was my second daughter. And I was like, I don't know. Okay. Because I figured, well, I'll either have the time of my life and I'll know that I want to direct, or I will learn that directing is really hard and I want nothing to do with it because I'm a youngest child and a follower. And a clown, as we stated before, who's going to listen to a clown on set. But I did it and it went really well. And we made a really good first short film. It was called Killing Vivian. You can actually
Okay.
see it on my website or on my Vimeo. It's up for people to enjoy. And that was my first short film. Missy Pyle's in it. Patrick Fabian is in it. But it was really, it was just really, it rang all the bells. That's at that moment when I was like, oh, I've been practicing music and I've been practicing editing and I've been practicing talking with actors and working on comedy and getting beats down. And I've been like, the thing that I really had to work on more was my visual language because, but then even with music videos, you have to, you have to make things kind of interesting and tell a story with quick shots. So, but that was the thing that was probably the biggest challenge is like, oh, how do I make this cool like a film and not just like a goofy music video?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so that was my first foray. And then once I did that, again, it was just so fun and gratifying. And I found my tribe. I couldn't believe that there were people that would do these 12-hour days with me. We would just find a weekend. I would write a pretty tight little short, and then I would get actors that I loved and had always wanted to work with and get to tell these stories. I could not believe that people were helping me, were showing up and thought that it was as much fun as I did. That was the part that was really just like, oh my God, this is happening.
Wow. That's great. And I
Yeah.
guess that's how you do it. You find other similar people who have those same passions and want to hop into the clown car and let you drive it, as I guess you could say.
I mean, fun drives me to do anything. Like I can't even work out, but if I'm listening to a great podcast or a soundtrack or an audiobook or something that's fun for me, then I can do it. So like that, I just made a bunch of shorts. And then finally after I made a couple dramatic shorts too. And I got more serious as a filmmaker with every short. I was learning new tools and I tried to really do different things to sort of learn each piece of the puzzle so that finally I felt I was ready to do a feature.
But even that jump from shorts to features, I mean, you might feel ready creatively, but there's still like a jump just in the scope, right? Like in the scope, like, well, we're not necessarily just, who's got a free weekend? It's like, it's kind of passes that point where suddenly it's like, wow, we've got to have a budget and we've got to build this schedule and we have to get all these people to commit to this period of time. We've got to find people to finance this thing. Like there's still like this big level, this little step up from just short filmmaking to that.
Like you're getting to that real point, like that jump from, for example, what do you remember what Killing Vivian's budget was?
Oh yeah, I do. $5,000.
Okay. So that jump from $5,000 to say $40,000 to say whatever the budget was for Jess Plus None, right? Like getting to that point, that jump seems to come with, does it come with the stakes that I imagine it comes with, or is it just another project?
It does come with stakes. The financial stakes of doing an indie film right now is that the film business is really struggling, right? In terms of indie film and how it gets out there, and movie theaters, like it's just it's a very small. It's, how do I put this? Like there's a. If you're going to make a splash with an indie film, you really have to have somebody famous in it. And then it very quickly becomes not an indie film. So what happens is the middle class of filmmaking really gets, it's kind of just a really hard no man's land, because you either have a star, someone who can get distribution and financing and attachment, and then that automatically balloons something up into a bigger thing. Or you're doing these smaller things and everyone's like, good luck. It's a great movie. No one cares. Like there's a little bit of that sometimes. But so the leap was that's what the risk is the financial risk, because ultimately you have to say to people, hey, you might be investing in a piece of art, which by the way is what people did. You go to France, go to museums in France and you go, oh yeah, all these people had patrons, or they made a lot of religious art because people were paying for religious art. Like their industry was driven by those things, but they had to get, you had to rely on the kindness of strangers a little bit, like people who just wanted art to exist and they saw the value in it, so they would pay for it on the front end. So that's kind of what we did with Jess Plus None is, we could have, you can keep pursuing for the bigger model, like the bigger, like, oh, let's do $3 million or $5 million. That did feel big to me, to be honest. And but also, I mean, it just would have taken forever because nobody, I don't know, it's like with celebrities, they're so careful, they're so guarded. They're, it's a whole thing. And it takes you very much into the business of filmmaking and far away from the creative of it, in my opinion. At least so for my first movie, I wanted a little bit more control. So we did finance with independent equity, and we got people to say, hey, we're hoping you're going to make this money back, but you might not. So you're investing in a piece of art, which I thought was, that's one strategy that I think works really well. I mean, in terms of the creative risk then, once I knew that I had people who just believed in my work, and loved what I did and loved the script. I had a really strong script. So that was the thing that made people go, oh, I don't care. I just want to, it has a bisexual lead, which, as you know, everybody needs
Yeah.
not only bisexual children, but bisexual leads in their movies.
Definitely settled social science. Like, we get that.
Yeah. No, and it was just, I think it rang bells for people. So they wanted to see it made. That was the luck part of it, is like, I had the skills. I had been on sets, trailing directors on 1-hour dramas, which essentially is like 10 days of shooting. And it's like, it's really intense. So I had done sort of the half marathon of movie, if you will. I had that experience trailing other directors and watching what they did and how they managed their energy and their time. And then before I went to do it, I reached out to other directors who had done features and said, give me your top 3 tips. One that was funny that I never would have guessed is don't drink coffee all day. And it's true. It actually makes you more tired.
Yeah.
So
And dehydrated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it was a very big leap, but it was my dream, So
Sure, yeah.
that the love of it, and then the belief that, I should say, the idea that I don't know if I'm ever going to get to do this again. This might be like my one swing. So I made a real commitment to myself. Enjoy this, like enjoy every second. It's going to be really hard and it's going to be really scary. And it's a huge risk because all these people have given you money and said, go forth and prosper. And, but I had to sort of shake all of that off and go back to my clown roots and be like, I know how to do this. I've shown that I have success in doing this. All of my films got 3 of them got theatrical distribution. They all got, online distribution things. They all won awards. Like, I can do this.
Sure, yeah.
And so the commitment to having fun was the most important thing, actually, in spite of all of the hugeness of that. Yeah. Of the pressure.
I suppose that's a very difficult thing when you finally get a chance to step into those shoes. Suddenly, the director, I mean, in the scope of like people above the line, people kind of in charge of a film set, obviously the producer has a lot of weight as far as managing the logistics, the financing, all of that sort of thing. But as the director, I mean, you're kind of like the center of a bicycle, tire, right? You're all the spokes funnel to you. Everybody's constantly asking you questions about this costume, or does this makeup look right, or how does this? Do you like this look for the shot and the lighting, and all, like so many questions coming at you that you can lose track of that, right? You have. I just want to have fun. I want this vision of. I want it just to be funny, and this is my vision, but suddenly it's like so many other things coming at you. Like, what do you do internally to still remember that and keep that core close when everybody's coming out with other things?
I would say this is true for anybody who's doing a creative process, right? There's no job that's 100% fun and stress-free, right? I suppose there are things that, but no, anything worth it is even going to have bumps in the road, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that part of it is fun for me, though. It's only not it's not fun when you're not on the same page creatively with someone, and then you have to make a decision about that's best for the project, right? Like, how do I manage this? Is it better for me to manage this now, or do we need to find another person to do this job? Or what are my compromises that I can make, or what can I push this person to do that I really, how do I push back if it's something I really wanted? Like, those can be the sticky things, but overall, I think it's just really important. Some of it is luck, right? Like, you have to find the right people who hear about your job and want to do your job and are available at that time. But I had great people. Like, the secret for me has always been hire amazing actors, get an amazing producer, get the people who are just really going to have your back and listen to you and want to support the idea. So people coming to me with wardrobe, like, it was so fun. It was like, it was everything that I wanted to do, that I had been ready to do. So that part didn't overwhelm me. That didn't keep me from having fun. The only time it got a little tricky is when you would get pushback. You would run into a thing where you're like, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. You need to give me like 5 minutes. But that's part of the fun too. Like, I've always been like, oh, I want to run marathons and I want to like do extreme things. Like, So for me, the night when I was like, oh, I have 5 hours to shoot 8 pages? That's different. Okay. And I had a whole shot list and I had a whole prep thing, but I just like when I looked at the schedule, I just didn't realize that with the light where we needed the light to be for that time, I had 5 hours.
Sure, yeah, right.
And I wanted to do all this stuff. And so I was like, I just kicked it into high gear. And I was like, that's part of the joy of having edited my own stuff early on is I can pivot, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. It's fun and it's scary because then you're sending the dailies to the editor going, hey, is there anything we need to reshoot or pick up? Like, did I miss anything? Like, is this going to work? You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But
well, for people who are tuning in who haven't had a chance to see it yet, the story, I mean, it's interesting because the bringing up the lighting is a key part of your story. We're following Jess, who's kind of a little hopeless in her life, a little bit of a mess, trying to figure herself out as she goes to a wedding that's at like a campsite, that her best friend's wedding. She's going to be the maid of honor. And it's just like, one of those situation comedies where they're all at this camp where many of them aren't campers. And it's one of those sorts of situations. But also Jess has one of those kind of like wrecking ball sorts of personalities as she bumps into all these other relationships and kind of like makes a mess of a lot of things. But so much of the film takes place in the great outdoors at this campsite, and you're dealing with lighting that you have to be planning. Okay, well, we only have this window of sun because of all the trees and the mountains and everything else around us. You're paying attention to weather patterns, all of these sorts of things that you suddenly have to be taking account when you're plotting all of this.
At what point did you say to yourself, like during the shoot, damn, I wish I'd written a movie that took place in a controlled set?
Oh, God. Well, what's interesting? One of the first inspirations that I had was I was on a campground, like camping. And I thought, I want to shoot a movie here because this light, the way this looks and feels to me is just perfect. It's my favorite environment. I was really dumb about that. I was like, what? The sun's out. It'll be lit all day. I didn't understand that we had to put up the silks and manage it so that the light was consistent, all that. Yes, that was a total nightmare. But what was great about it is here I was, it's 2021, and I have a movie that's shot 90% outdoors.
Right.
I mean, it was COVID.
That's smart. Well, weirdly timed to be perfect for that sort of shooting.
And also because we were on a campground and we were all like sharing cabins and bunks, and like my sister came in and catered for the whole crew. And it was like we had to bubble. Like people came up there and stayed at that campground for 3 weeks and didn't go anywhere. And then we still tested for COVID, but that was part of our strategy was like, look, we're all outside. And at that point it was safer. You could be maskless outside. Yeah. And then, it was kind of a gift because of the timing of it that I had a movie that actually could be shot during COVID without all of the constraints and financial constraints. I mean, a COVID budget for a movie was like, what?
Extraordinary.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like Shondaland kind of budgets.
Yeah. The fact that we could sort of manage that was helpful. And I will say, this is the gift of it too. I found there were all these unbelievable gifts. Like when you tell a crew, hey, guess what? You're going to be sharing a cabin with some other crew members and you're going to be sleeping and sharing a bathroom. And like, we're going to basically camp for 2 weeks in the woods. There are certain people that are like not up for that job.
Yeah.
And the people who are up for it, who are excited by it, who go, oh, thank God, I need to get out into nature. They tend to be really cool people. I actually think that's how we had the amazing crew we did. Is like, they were all like, oh, thank God, get me into the woods,
Right.
So that was so good.
Funny.
Can we talk just a little bit about how you got the cast you got? I mean, these people are funny, and I just like from where you were on first big feature that's all yours. What did it take to get a guy like Matt Walsh and Rory O'Malley? Like you're friends with these people, right? Like did they just say yes because they love you?
I knew Matt peripherally. I had met him ages ago. I did improv with a buddy of his. So I knew him and I'd had dinner with him a couple times. But I don't think he knew my work. But I knew him. So I reached out to him because I actually thought he would be perfect to play the Ranger. Sort of like offbeat, is he really on this planet with us kind of guy who had suffered a loss, who had like sort of an natural ennui, but could also be funny. I just thought he was my perfect choice. So I sent him the script and he liked it. So obviously he didn't audition, but he said yes. And then Rory, I met through the casting director. I knew Hamilton, but I didn't know him specifically. And Book of Mormon, I didn't know him.
Right?
Yeah. So I knew he was a big Broadway guy, and I loved his reel. So I cast him through the casting director, recommended him. And there were other people that the casting director was really she gave me choices, and then I found things. Abby Miller.
Abby, is she how you found, through the casting director, you found Abby?
No, I knew Abby because we were singer-songwriters at the same time, and we used to do gigs together. And actually, one of the songs in the movie is hers.
Yes.
And a bunch are mine. And so that's how we met. But then I knew she was an actress, and I would have her come to every reading of every screenplay I ever did, because she always made a character interesting, and she was just special. We would leave a reading and everybody would go, who's the girl who played the sister? Or who's that girl who, so she, and she was always cast doing drama. She was never allowed to do comedy, but I thought she was hysterically funny. So she was gracious enough to play with the material with me. And like, when I met with her, I was like, oh, she's got this. Like, she knows how to do this character because she's lovable and also willing to be as awkward as Jess is. Like, Jess is like my inner, that is how I feel inside. That is how I feel every day, every minute. Right now on this podcast, I am Jess.
Well, she is a slam dunk. Like, she's just perfect for the role in a movie that is that just tells such a neat, awkward story with just the right number of jokes. And it's practically a Marvel film. There's CG that I didn't notice.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. I was so lucky to have a VFX guy who was very understanding about me. I'm like, I need a bunny and a rabbit. And a what else? Oh, and an owl.
An owl?
Yeah. And I was like,
totally into the movie. I was like, I had no idea that this. I was like, is this like the BBC right now? You just sat there in like a high hide and waited for animals to come by? That was amazing.
You want to hear something really funny? When he showed me the owl clip, at first I was like, oh, wow. And then I thought, I don't know, does that look real? And then I looked at a real owl. I was like, oh no, that is how owls look.
That's how owls look. They're weird. Yeah. Well, and this was it. I remember you called me, and we were talking after I first saw the movie, and you said, did you notice any of the CG? I said, well, I totally noticed one shot, which is at the very end when Abby hucks her cell phone across the street. I was like, clearly that's CG, because no one throws a phone that far. And that's not CG at all. She's got an arm.
Yeah, that was great. Oh, it's so funny.
That's funny because I noticed that too. I'm like, man, she really hooked that.
Yeah.
Thing. Like, that's like, I'm really getting rid of this thing.
I really wonder, in movies, you worry about movies becoming dated. There were a few people that were like, I just don't believe that anybody would ever throw their phone. And I'm like, maybe you need to take a look at yourself, that you would never throw a cell phone.
You're the person who can't go. Yeah. You're the person who can't handle not having Wi-Fi when you're camping, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know. And I'm like, in 20 years, that'll be the thing that everybody talks about in the movie. Like, there's just no one ever throws their phone.
Yeah, right.
Why didn't she just use the implant?
Yeah, right.
Should we transition to The Big Chill?
Yeah, I think we should shift to The Big Chill. And I watched The Big Chill, then I watched Jess Plus None. And it's funny, when I started Jess Plus None, because I walked into it pretty blind, I didn't realize that it was so much like the similar story. I'm like, okay, it's a group of friends. They're all kind of coming together for this one thing. I mean, it's a wedding as opposed to a funeral, but they're all coming together, and relationships and all this. I'm like, that was such an interesting thing. I want to talk about like your origin story with The Big Chill, like when you first saw it and stuff. But first I want to say, when you were putting Jess Plus None together, were you like, is this something about Big Chill that you were tapped into, as far as like, I love that idea of people coming together who all haven't been around each other for a while and let the drama ensue? Was there an influence there?
It was completely an influence. I mean, I don't know that it was, well, I mean, actually, I bet it was conscious, because I saw The Big Chill when I was 12.
Okay.
My parents had separated and were getting divorced, and my adult relationships everywhere I saw were in chaos. I lived in a small town in Texas on a ranch out kind of in the middle of nowhere, but we did have one thing. We had HBO. I mean, like literally we had like the 3 channels, and then somehow magically through the ranch place where we lived, we got HBO for free. And
Nice.
The Big Chill was playing on HBO at that time. And I watched it every time it came on. And I just couldn't believe that grown-ups would talk that way. I think there was such a connection, such intimacy, like that these grown-ups would like kiss each other on the lips when they're just friends,
Yeah,
and that
right,
they
right.
would have this, connection that was so deep and beautiful, just friends, not like I'm gonna marry you and have kids. I knew married people that didn't have that connection,
Right.
So I think as a kid, that lit me up because I was craving people talking about real shit, right? So sorry, am I allowed to
Yeah,
curse?
it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm doing pretty well, actually. What
You
are we?
really are.
30
This is
minutes
a-
in? That's what-
Yeah, noted.
Yeah, thank you. But so I think that just excited me. The storytelling of that really excited me. And that's what I write. I'm constantly writing, like, mothers leaving their children or brides that are finding out that their husband's cheating on them the day of the wedding, or like my movies are very sort of they're about people talking and dealing with things,
Yeah.
adult issues.
Right,
And
right.
so that's what this inspired in me. So when I wanted to do a movie, I love ensemble comedies. I love ensemble movies that like where characters begin a place and then end another place.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that just excited me. I treasure my friends. I have really good friends from high school and college, and
Do you kiss them all on the lips? Is that
I
part of
do.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Prerequisite?
Big kisser.
Talk about being dated. No, I was going to say something so dirty. I'm not going to say that. Let's just say friendships have evolved. Um, no, no, but like that, I do. I am that friend who
Yeah.
wants to talk about your feelings all the time. Like I want to know how you are and where your heart is and where you are in the scheme of where we all exist in this world. That's what I like to talk about. So I tend to, write characters that want to deal with the deeper stuff. Like I
Sure.
want to know why we're fighting. I don't want to brush it under the rug,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
and why we're all vulnerable together.
One of the things that's so interesting about this movie is that none of the individual exploits between these characters blow up to become the purpose of the film. And case in point, when when she, as Mary Kay Place, is like looking for somebody to help her to sire a child for her, that just becomes a thing that they do. Like she figures it
Yeah.
out. She likes all these guys. She's like, oh, and it turns out it's going to be the one who's married and with somebody else, but that's going to be okay. We're all going to be fine with that. And they're just going to do it. And it's not going to break up a marriage, and it's not going to break up a friendship. It's just going to be adults doing like really adult things and
Yeah.
figuring out that the drama in the movie exists elsewhere. You don't have to focus on the most prurient of dramatic beats.
Yeah,
That's
it's nuanced.
amazing.
It's nuanced, and people having affairs, having sex, saying things that are hurtful.
Mhm.
It's not this thing that then. What I love about that movie is it doesn't define who they are for the rest of their lives. It's
Right.
something that they do. Like they kind of all get to be nuanced and difficult and struggling and emotional and still be friends at the end of the day. Nobody decides they're never going to talk to each other again
Right.
at the end of that movie, because they have a bond. And I love the opening credits. I just marvel at those. I watched them as an inspiration. We all actually got together on the set of Jess Plus None and watched The Big Chill as a group
Oh, nice.
before we started shooting, because I was like, this is what you should take into your toolbox as actors. This kind of history, this kind
Sure.
of love and who you've been together.
Mhm.
And I think it really informed their performance. I ripped off The Big Chill. When you asked me them things, I think I added that scene of them dancing after I had rewatched it and been like, I love watching them dance in the
Sure,
kitchen, I mean, the packing, right? The seeing what's in their suitcases. We had to cut a lot of that at the beginning because it was just taking us too long to get at the camp. But I had originally shot all of what was inside all of my characters' suitcases too. And I had done that unconsciously.
That's interesting.
Was it? Did everyone have a hairdryer?
Funny?
That was
What a weird-
awesome.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
That's kind of a weird little item that they all have. Yeah. I love that Mary
Tom
Kay Place,
Berenger's is the best.
and Mary Kay Place just smokes everywhere. Did that not jar you? You're like, she's smoking in the kitchen. She's smoking in her office. She's smoking in the car. It's, we've gone so far from smoking that's the thing in the movie. I'm like, whoa.
There's
like
there's a
sharing cigarettes.
specific-
I'm just going to take that from you, and I just need some too. Yeah.
She has her briefcase and she's staring hard at the crucifix, at crucified Jesus Christ on a cross. And she opens her briefcase to hide it and takes out like 3 packs of cigarettes. Like,
Right?
it's just perfect. This was one of the first movies, like you talk about how adults talk to each other and kiss each other. This is also one of the first movies that I remember seeing where adults were doing drugs casually.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny,
Yeah, that was a really interesting thing. Like I feel like I grew up a little bit watching this movie because it changed the way I looked at my parents, and it changed the way I thought about what are my parents doing when they go across the street to have dinner with our neighbors. And it like changes the worldview when you realize that the thing I'm taught in school to fear and shun and revile is a thing that adults in this movie that I like are doing without repercussion, right?
Yeah.
The double standard, I think, is illuminating in this movie and so beautifully articulated.
I agree. I also I remember feeling as I was going through college, well, someone's going to offer me drugs at some point, aren't they? Nobody did. I don't know why, but I was expecting to have that experience of like, oh, we're all going to do uppers together. I think because that movie,
right.
That was very.
I think for me, it was Poltergeist, seeing the 2 parents just smoking a joint in bed. Like, I think that's probably where I first saw it. But like, this was definitely a thing where it's just like, a variety of different, there's pills, there's joints, there's, he's got the Coke, like there's all these different things. And it's just so casual. And it really was, it was a different time. And that there's an acknowledgement of that. And, certainly this is a group of people that, this story takes place in the early to mid 80s about a group of people who, went to school together in the late 60s, definitely the hippie generation, now the yuppie generation. And they still have that connection. And that, I think, was an interesting element, watching them dealing with those different elements in the process, whether it's just kind of the casual use of drugs as they're doing it, or just like figuring out like where they are in the quote grown up, the journey that they're taking. And you certainly see that with William Hurt's character in some of the situations, like when he can't believe when Kevin Kline's character is so friendly with the cop, right? After the cop comes over, and it's just like, what are you doing? And he's just like, I live here. I have made my life here. I have this space, and this is what I'm going to be doing, and I'm happy with this. That was like a real interesting journey that we see, or just kind of like the way that the relationships start growing and changing over time. And, we're getting bits and pieces with William Hurt, who's kind of like in some sense, a very murky character as to like his story, but from his little self-interview, it certainly seemed like he's got some PTSD after Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
But like the changes and the struggles as they're growing and figuring out how to do it, right? How to be a grown-up and how to work through life. And that, I had forgotten that part of it, is just like figuring out how to become an adult and just make it work.
Yeah, I love the line that they have where they're talking about money. I think it's excuse me. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. Wait, the guy who plays JT Lancer.
It was Berenger.
Berenger, yeah.
Yes.
I always want to call him Tom Skerritt, but it's not. Tom Berenger. He and Kevin Kline are having that conversation about money, and Kevin Kline says, it's a good thing it doesn't matter to us, right? Or it's a good thing it's not important to us.
Yeah, right.
And that was a really funny, like, oh yeah, because they used to be like, screw the man and screw money and all that. And And now he says,
Oh.
hey, that cop has kept my place from being ripped off a couple times.
Well, and I think that the setup for that line is actually the other part that's really important when Berenger says, "Who knew we would be making all this dough?"
Oh, that's
Right?
right. Yes.
And the answer is, good thing it's not important to us, with a wink, right?
Right.
Because of course it's important to them. Like
Yeah, they've
Berenger's
grown
moving
up.
it up. Like he's struggling because he's playing a crappy part he doesn't like anymore, but he's still kind of living the dream.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, right.
So,
William Hurt is an interesting character too. And I read an article on this, like how, he is a very privileged guy, right? He as I didn't he gets he doesn't finish his doctorate, but he gets through a master's and starts pursuing a doctorate. He gets a job as a radio psychiatrist. He's drifting, and now he's drug dealing, and he's driving this old Porsche and wearing his cool sunglasses. And like, I think William Hurt really added this wonderful human element to that character. Like, if you just look at that character on paper, he's a real douchebag, kind of, but he is so gentle. William Hurt makes him sort of gentle and lost. If you just look at the elements of that character on paper,
yeah.
but overall too, his privilege has allowed him to flail like this. I mean, they all kind of ask a lot of very privileged questions. Their problems are that very,
It is a
It's
certain
funny.
group of people, but yeah.
It's a funny manifestation of privilege, though, because it's the trappings of privilege. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
loose drugs, but it's also a Porsche 911 that is a piece of garbage, right? Like,
Right, the rooftops
Yeah.
peeling off.
That's true.
yeah, right. It's a piece of junk, and he gets out, like, he drives it as if he is a man of privilege, but
Yeah.
he gets out of it like he's not, right? He is the trappings and the superficiality.
Yeah,
but
that's
it's more of the struggle, I think, than the merit.
That's a really good point, because then he goes to that broken down, not broken down, but the sort of half built cabin in the woods. And he's
Yeah.
just sitting there listening to the birds, and he's finding like, oh my God, this is great. This might be
Yeah.
where I belong.
It becomes his identity, right?
Yeah.
Or he finds his identity there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the one who at the end of the film decides to stay and essentially kind of take over Alex's own journey of finishing this place, like using it as an opportunity to reconnect with himself. And it didn't work for Alex, but in the scope of the story, Nick is hoping that it will work for him. And I think that was an interesting element of this.
To the point, Andy, where he takes over that role with Meg Tilly, like she's
Yeah.
sitting there too,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Like she gives him Alex's jacket, and right, it's just the whole thing. He just sort of fits in hand to glove to Alex's old life, and maybe it'll be better.
It's interesting. Like I remember when I watched it, I didn't have any judgment on that. Like, you just kind of go, oh, he's going to do that now. As a grown up watching it, it's like, oh, you're going to take over the suicidal guy's life? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Because the
well, that-
last thing I saw of Suicidal Guy was his wrist, right?
Yeah.
That's the memory I have of Alex at that moment as an audience member. And that's one of those like horrifying visions to carry across through what is ultimately a loving tribute to an old friend.
Yeah. And you guys know, I'm sure if you know, Kevin Costner played Alex and then was cut out of the film.
Oh.
But then Lawrence Kasdan put him into Silverado
Right.
as a
That was okay.
I've never seen that whole, I don't know if he's ever released that, because it was a whole scene that took place like at the end of the film, right? Like after we got to the end, it was a whole scene that was a flashback to their time at college. I remember, was it Joe Beth Williams or Mary Kay Place? So I remember one of them talking about that time when they shot that and how much fun they had, and just kind of shifting their, because I think her character was, I think, living with, she was living with Nick, and she was avoiding Sam, and like, so we get to see kind of that life, and the carefree life of that whole journey of them and everything. And Kevin Costner was there playing himself. But yeah, that whole thing was.
It's such a better choice, I think, to never see him. Right? It's It was. I'm so glad that they did that. Poor Kevin Costner, but like, I'm really glad.
Yeah, at least he got another role out of it. But yeah. To your point though, like the fact that we do never see him as audience members, we only know him. It's interesting because they talk about like, why didn't he leave a note? Why did he do this? Like they're trying to figure out what happened with Alex too. Like they've obviously lost touch. They're like, did we really know him? When's the last time you talked to him? Like they're having those conversations, trying to figure it out, and they don't really know who he is. But their connections to him last, and that's the key thing. And I think I think it's when Nick is going through those old papers and everything and finds that article that Jeff Goldblum's character had written about him when he turned down that fellowship. And like, there was this, I don't know, they obviously take that conversation in a different direction. But for me, I was like, that to me said, Alex also has never let go of this group and still is connected to these people and still finds it to be his own family.
Why watching it again, I was like, I don't think I ever connected that fellowship thing. Like, were they sort of setting that up as the reason that he felt depressed because he always regretted not taking that fellowship? It wasn't quite clear. That was something I noticed this time around watching it. I was like, I don't think I totally get that.
Yeah, my sense of it, because I don't think it's not something I remembered either. But I think it's Meg Tilly's character who says, like, there's one thing he always regretted turning that fellowship down, and that seems to be a thing in the group where a lot of them suddenly are affected by, oh my God, like that really kind of takes them.
They all have this emotional moment about that fellowship that I had not noticed before. It's such an interesting, like, I love movies like this where people they're sitting around talking.
Yeah.
Nobody who gets to make movies like this, but I really love them. I find them so satisfying.
Well, and the fact that this is a movie, sitting around talking is one thing, but two, that what they're talking about is stuff that they trust me to fill in whatever blanks I need to fill in. Case in point, this fellowship conversation. I don't know what that's about, but all I need to care about is their emotional reaction to it, because that affects how they'll relate to each other. And so I think having, like, Kasdan has such faith as a filmmaker in the audience to be able to keep up. It's like my favorite thing about watching movies is knowing when I'm in good hands, when a director actually gives me something to work with, as to chew on, and not spoon feed it to me. There's not a lot of obvious ADR. There's not a lot of the voiceover. It could have been Costner's voice describing the experience of
that's true,
Carolina plantation experience, and we didn't have to have that because of trust.
Yeah. Even the allowing things to unfold, like the relationship between Joe Beth Williams and Tom. It's not Skerritt. Berenger. Poor Tom Berenger.
Wow.
But like, their tension that grows between her deciding to stay and then them just having these normal conversations, walking and talking, and her getting him breakfast and him kind of being clueless as to what's happening and her being very specific about it. But they let it grow over, like, there's nothing said. It's just shown.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. Like, I love that he lets that develop in such a simple way. And then at the end, after, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen The Big Chill, I think it's okay to do spoilers.
Right.
But after they consummate their love, and at the end, the next day, she's like, all right, well, we'll, Richard and I will bring the kids to Los Angeles. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Right. I remember as a kid, being like, wait, what? They're not going to end up together, but they just made love. I did not understand the adult nuance of that at all. I was like, but they should be married now. They belong together. Why is she going to go back with Richard?
That's another thing about making, they've made drugs an adult thing that can happen. They've made sex out of wedlock a thing that can just happen, and we're not going to worry too much about it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's interesting, too. They have all these really adult conversations, and then they do these really playful things like dancing in the kitchen, like playing the games outside. Another thing I ripped off from my movie completely. I don't think it was conscious, but when I rewatched The Big Chill, I was like, oh my God, I stole everything.
Well, okay. Montage of playing games outside is not strictly the purview of Big Chill and Jess Plus None.
Point.
I mean, we just talked about Top Gun. That you ripped off Top Gun is the bigger problem.
I would proudly rip off Top Gun. I didn't have enough shirtless people in my
No,
movie.
that's true.
That's a
Yeah,
regret
right.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in my
All
life,
fair.
really. Oh, yeah.
A big part of this film is definitely the soundtrack. Like that is a huge element of this film with, these characters, again, having grown up in that generation, we're getting music from their youth. And that's
Yep.
kind of how the soundtrack is built, with all these fantastic songs, kicking off with I Heard It Through the Grapevine, which perfectly kind of connects through the storytelling of, relaying the message about Alex's death to everybody.
Right?
Like
It's
all these different,
perfect.
it works so well. But all these different stories where it is like from beginning to end, it really is kind of defining the tone. And I think there is an interesting element of in the film about using the music to connect to who they were as they're figuring out who they are,
Mhm.
right? And also, just as a side note on that, I do think that it's interesting that Jeff Goldblum's character is the one who's just like, don't you have anything, there's good music now. Don't you have anything else to listen to other than all this old crap?
Yeah.
Like, which was also telling, I think, just as far as the characters. But I think there's such an interesting voice that Kasdan chose to create in this tone of the film by making the soundtrack this way.
I completely agree. That's something that made an impression on me as a kid. Like, I think I listened to the soundtrack. I got it and listened to it over and over again. And the consistency of it, like it was another character in the movie because it was all sort of this genre. It was soulful and primal, this music, and connected to this time in their life. So it was not just sort of background music or just appropriate for this scene or that. Like it created this really cohesive tone for the movie that I loved. Like and that's something, like when I was doing Jess Plus None, I stuck to soundtrack music. Well, a lot of it is sung by people in the movie,
Yeah.
which is really fun. But for the score, I on purpose wanted to do something that felt very cohesive. Like it was it was as if there's a cabin somewhere off of this campground, and there's a gang of musicians that are jamming. It was all instruments that were real, and things that you might find that you could possibly hear off in the distance in the woods. Like I wanted it to actually come from that place and be sort of another character of like, we're out here in nature, old school.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that was because of The Big Chill. It was made such an impression on me.
Well, and part of the thing about the soundtrack of The Big Chill is that it wasn't my music, right? It was my parents' music.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that made it sort of a step more foreign and intriguing and provocative to me. Like that introduced me to so much music that I never thought of. And it is one of the soundtracks, like every decade there's one of those principal soundtracks. I think the 80s actually probably had more than its fair share, because
Yes.
Saturday Night Fever, Purple Rain, Dirty
Purple Rain.
Dancing, right?
Oh, God, yes.
Those soundtracks are like we burned them up at my house.
Yep.
So
Did you know that the Big Chill soundtrack actually surpassed Saturday Night Fever as one of the top selling soundtracks of all time?
Does not surprise me at all.
Yeah,
I did not know that, but that doesn't surprise me. And you hear it in the music. I think, I mean, did they put it in use order? Because I felt like as soon as I would hear a song playing, I would remember exactly what was going on in the next scene. Like that, it felt like every time I listened to the soundtrack, I would remember the movie so clearly. It's a weird little bit of alchemy.
Well, that was one of those soundtracks that was frustrating because they released it and it was only like 10 songs on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then they released another one, like more music from the Big Chill or things like that.
Oh, that's right.
I hate we just release it all. Like it was always so annoying when they would release soundtracks that way.
Yeah.
But
Well, back then, I mean, I don't know for sure, but wouldn't it have been on a record? Where were we in the 80s?
You could get a LP or a cassette.
Yeah,
maybe
CDs
a
were
cassette.
around and CDs were around.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't buying them in the early mid 80s, but they were around.
They were?
Yeah, they
Oh.
started in the mid 80s, I think.
Oh, well, there you
So
go.
yeah, yeah. And
Oh,
But yeah,
wow.
but because I know by the late 80s, I know I had some CDs. I know my dad was already buying CDs by then, but
Oh, yeah, that
uh,
makes sense. Yeah.
Do you remember your first CD?
Oh, that's a good question.
My first CD was Def Leppard, Hysteria.
Yeah. All
It's a
right.
good band.
Oh, that's a good one.
Good one.
I play that a lot.
That get hysterical. Okay, we could do it. All right,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mandy.
I'm pretty sure that I am so cheap that I would have clung to cassette tapes forever and ever.
Okay, that's on brand. I get it.
Oh, yeah. But I actually think that it would have been maybe the When Harry Met Sally soundtrack. I know that's late,
Oh,
but
that
I feel
was
like
80,
that,
Yeah.
89. That was
Yeah.
89.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
That's
mean,
right
so
around
I
when we
just
were
had to
probably starting
confirm
dating.
because mid '80s. Yeah, actually, you're a little bit late. The first CD was 1982.
Oh
okay.
my
Right?
God.
Think about that. My first CD was a compilation CD of recordings of movie symphonic scores called Time Warp.
What?
And it had like the Also Sprach Zarathustra from 2001. It had the Star Trek theme. It had like it was all of the great sci-fi
Themes, yeah.
themes. Time Warp. Yeah,
Wow. So
that was my first CD.
you've been into movie music for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, and I was into music. Like that was my thing in high school, and I was a musician, so it was easy.
Yeah.
And kind of a poser. Come on, like I was not a conductor. Like I played the piano. Come on, I could play a little ragtime. Enough.
Right.
I love I love ragtime as a movie score. It makes me think of like Woody Allen movies. I love that he always used classic. I mean,
Like old I always think of the
Rhapsody in Blue and
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the one with the movie with Sean Penn as the musician in the 20s?
oh
Like, that's-
yes,
I just feel like Django Reinhardt.
Yep.
Oh.
Or Django Reinhardt-esque sort of character
Yeah.
in that film. But like that's the sort of tone I think of often with Woody Allen films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He who shall not be named.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Sorry about
So-
the rest of it.
So Pete, it's interesting you brought up like Dirty Dancing and some of these other films that had classic 80s soundtracks, but were from the 80s. I'm trying to think like what is a film that would have come out, I guess, in this would have been maybe the aughts that would have been like tapping into that sort of music, but in this sort of style. Like, was there a film that did this same sort of thing, like for our generation? Can you think of anything? It would have been like late 80s, early 90s.
Reality Bites
music. But that was made in the 90s. I'm
made
trying
in
to
the
think of
90s,
like
yeah.
that one that takes place like when they're in their mid 30s, looking back on that time in their 20s in college. I don't know. Is there anything?
Man.
Oh.
Oh, I guess here's another question.
I listened to Garden State
Yeah, Garden
all
State.
over the place. So that's one. Like they were coming back for, and Grief and sitting on a train and listening to some very moody music. So
But
Garden
it was
State
modern music, though,
close.
right?
Yeah, it was modern music. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. What is there anything that's looking back? Or
So
maybe here's the question, since maybe there's not. What would you put on the soundtrack? If you were making a movie of celebrating like those people from your college years, what are the songs that kind of define that?
Dead Man's Party.
Ew.
Oh.
For sure, some Oingo Boingo. It would have to include stuff like the Pixies and the Breeders and Depeche Mode and the OMD and I mean I just like that's there was an article in the Wall Street Journal not long ago that said, when people say I want it to be like the good old days, when were the good old days? And it turns out if you ask anybody when the good old days were, it was like 3 ages. It was like 11 when you were 11, when you were 15, and when you were like 18 or something, right? So when you're
What?
imagining what the world
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
the best time to ever be is when you were 11 years old because you didn't know who terrorists were.
Yeah, you didn't know anything.
The price of oil didn't matter because you couldn't drive and music was great, right?
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's what we're all fighting for, something we can never get to because it's us, right? Right.
That's such a funny, I mean, I get 11 and childhood, but then
Yeah.
15 and 18 feel real close. Like,
They do feel real close, but I think maybe that's because a lot of people lose their virginity in that range. So of course
That's
everything is awesome
exactly.
because we start having sex. So
There was that good old day, and then there was
yeah,
that good
and
old
that
day.
good old
That
day,
was
and
a
that one
really
good
good
old
old
day
day.
in that old pile of dirty laundry, and there was that good old day at the back of the car. So you get it. So anyway, I think that's really interesting. And so when I think of that music, like all those bands come right off the top of my head because, oh my God, like those were the good old days.
Those are the good
right?
old days. Yeah.
Peter Murphy, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like it is interesting how some music does feel like generation defining.
Totally.
And I think that's, I mean, I love all of this music from the soundtrack. It's not from my generation,
Right.
but I've grown into it, but,
Yeah.
and I think that's just an interesting thing about like the way that music is used. And it would be interesting to see what would something about kind of our generations, like what music would they be putting on?
Yeah. What's our Big Chill soundtrack?
Yeah.
It feels like, I mean, I still think of the 80s. Like, I still think of 80s music as being this sort of, because that's the thing that's lasted in terms of, I have a basic music thing. Like, I either go to a concert and find a singer-songwriter that I like, and then I listen to them to death, or like I listened to Madonna in college. It's so embarrassing, but
Hey,
so
Madonna's great.
I mean,
it's okay.
It's all right.
yeah,
This is a safe space.
I tend to, listen to a lot of people that aren't, go to a music festival and you're like, I loved all those artists. And then I listen to them, but I can't remember any of their names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But in terms of things that last, it feels like 80s music is still something that evokes an era to me for my generation.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's when
Right?
you were like 11. Right.
good old days.
Right?
Oh, that's
Like,
a good. Well, those were the good old days.
Those
I was
were the
having a
good old
lot
days
of
for
sex,
you. right.
back
So
then.
much sex and
Yeah.
also
Oh,
great music.
riding horses and then
I
sex,
so many
more sex.
horses. Oh
And,
my
yeah.
God.
Packing a lunch
Thoroughbreds.
for school, then sex. Yep.
I think that's interesting because there's something to this. Like when I look at my kids, they're the best time of their lives is like the early 20 teens. That's the music that they go. They don't know who the 80s are. Like they don't care about 80s music. I play them a boatload of 80s music and they're like, I could really take it or leave it. I'm like,
That's
really?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and also just because the way music was delivered,
Right.
they don't have the same common language of music, right?
And
There's
they
not
don't listen to albums. They listen to playlists.
Yeah.
right. And it's all curated specifically from here. It's like, I listened to the radio the other day and it was like a radical act.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, other people are listening to the same songs I'm listening to.
Mhm.
Right.
And the songs that they play are songs that came before,
Yeah.
I mean, not true with like like KCRW, right? Like they're playing current things and helping you find new artists. But in terms of a common language of music,
Right.
it's tricky,
Yeah.
That's why I think like people like Taylor Swift have gotten so globally huge because, it's just easy. It's like the one person it's one of the people who's risen above the noise. So you
Yeah.
go to that instead of going to a radio station and listening to all those other artists that you are forced to listen to kind of to find them while you're waiting for the next Taylor Swift song.
The song of the summer as we record this, I'm dating it heavily right now, is Sabrina
Date it.
Carpenter's Espresso. A song I have no idea what the hell it's about. It's grammatically incorrect, and yet both of my kids are like, "This song is a banger," and we are
interesting.
we are
So-
house divided on
So
Sabrina
in
Carpenter's.
10
That's me,
years, Pete,
Espresso.
so in 10 years, Pete, when
Yeah.
when your kids are watching a movie about their generation going
Yeah.
through their or celebrating
Sabrina Carpenter
with their
will be there.
friends about their college days.
Yep.
That will be
Sabrina
on the
Carpenter,
playlist.
Taylor
Yeah.
Swift, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Olivia Rodrigo. Is that what you're
Olivia
gonna say?
Rodrigo,
Olivia Rodrigo
yes.
is going to be there.
Yes. Oh
For
my
sure.
God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, we have so much fun singing that around the house.
Right?
Yeah.
Driver's license? Oh, forget it.
Fun. Very
It's a
fun.
bad idea, right? Oh God, we love that song. All four of us become teenage girls.
Ending. What were we here to talk about again?
That's right.
I know exactly.
Well, I mean, it has been such a fun time talking with you, Mandy. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about the Big Chill, your career, Jess Plus None, all of this stuff. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I mean, this was such a treat. It was such a treat. When I started to rewatch The Big Chill, I was like, well, I've seen this movie a million times. I'll probably just, I'll just like hit the major points. And
Yeah.
then there's Patrick and I curled up on the couch laughing and grabbing each other and quoting it. Like it was just, it was such a pleasure. And it's always such a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Oh, well,
you.
we
You're
are
the
thrilled.
best.
Thank you so much. Your movie is certainly something that people should be looking for. Where do you
Yes.
have a place where people can be kind of keeping up on like when it's going to be released, where they can check it out and everything?
Yes, you can go to the website and check out the trailer and press and all the things there. And you can sign up for the mailing list there if you're old school, if you'd like to get a little thing in your inbox. And also, we're on Instagram and we're on X. You can go at Jess Plus None and follow us, and we will tell everybody there are going to be some theatrical screenings. The things that we know at this point, there's theatrical screenings this summer. So we have about 6 or 7 theaters that are showing it, and possibly
Great.
some larger chains, which is great.
Yeah.
That's going to be happening this summer. And then later this summer, we expect to be available online. I don't know where yet, but probably all the places you can get stuff online. So
Yeah.
it's super helpful to follow us so you can find that out. If you have seen the movie already, or when you see it, it's also super helpful if people rate it on IMDb for us, because that helps other people know what they think of the movie. If you don't like the movie, my name is Tina Fey. So just go to Mean Girls and just go ahead and rate that.
And rate that however you want. It'll just blend right in.
Yeah.
That's right.
But that's how
I have to-
people
I
can
have to
find out.
go to the website and click on merch and then go buy.
yes.
This is really important because there are 2 versions of the Nobody Fucks Brian t-shirt. And you can get the one with the big green print that no one has purchased, but it's my favorite.
Is it the one with the dildo?
It has a vibrator on it.
Oh, that vibrator, right?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I love it.
Lot of good font work.
It's too bad that they don't have vibrators that we could put the name of the movie on.
Yes.
TeePublic doesn't offer that.
They don't. Isn't that bizarre?
That's so strange.
So
Doesn't
frustrating.
Branded sex toys.
Maybe we would need to reach out to the right companies.
Yes.
Exactly.
Brand some of your merch.
We should
That's
there is a-
T-pubic.
That's
Oh, no. Did I? I did.
God. There is a healthy, and I say that with all respect, there is a healthy amount of masturbation in this movie, and it's
Yes.
delightful.
Oh, thank you.
Just
I
like
agree.
that is an extra star on any rating scale.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Honestly, I invite anyone, if you're watching the movie and you're asking yourself, why is she masturbating so much? My question is, why aren't
Why
you?
aren't you?
Why aren't you? Come on, guys. It's
That's a
going to
big
make everyone.
question.
Let's lower
Maybe
the
you'd
stress
understand
levels.
if you did it a little bit more.
Exactly. Oh, great.
Oh my gosh. Well, we will have the links for everything in the show notes. So just check on that. And like I said, we'll include the links to the Curiosity Codex so you can tune in and listen to the great conversations that Kyle had with Mandy about all of this. And so check everything out. And thanks everybody again for joining us. For everybody else out there, we hope you like the show and certainly hope you like the movie like we do here on Movies We Like. Movies We Like is a part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network and the Next Reel family of film podcasts. The music is Chonk Clap by Out of Flux. Find the show at truestory.fm and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd at The Next Reel. Learn about becoming a member at thenextreel.com/membership. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we always appreciate it if you drop one in there for us. See you next time.